My mother-in-law moved into my sanctuary temporarily and secretly gutted my home office while I was recovering. My husband defended her blatant disrespect, so I activated a ruthless, perfectly legal trap that evicted her entirely within 24 hours. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The drive home from the hospital was supposed to be the hardest part of the day. Every pothole, every slight break from the car felt like a white-hot wire pulling against the fresh row of stitches on my abdomen. I had just spent 4 agonizing days in a sterile, beeping hospital room recovering from an emergency appendectomy that had very nearly ruptured. I was 32 years old, an independent architect who was used to managing massive commercial construction sites, but in that passenger seat, I felt entirely fragile. My husband, Cameron, kept his eyes glued to the road, his jaw tight. He hadn't visited much during my stay, citing back-to-back meetings at the financial firm where he worked, but I had brushed it off. I just wanted my own bed. I wanted the familiar scent of cedarwood, the quiet hum of my refrigerator, and the sanctuary of the home I had poured my heart and soul into restoring. When Cameron finally pulled into the driveway of my Victorian-style home, a home I had purchased entirely on my own 3 years before I even met him, something felt immediately wrong. There was a large, gaudy floral wreath hanging on my solid oak front door. I blinked, rubbing my tired eyes, thinking perhaps the pain medication was causing hallucinations. I despised floral wreaths. Cameron knew this. "Cameron," I rasped, my throat still raw from the intubation tube. "Where did that come from?" He killed the engine inside, a heavy, burdened sound that made my stomach knot. "Look, Kennedy, my mom is here. Her apartment building had a massive plumbing failure 2 days ago. Black water everywhere. She needed a place to stay temporarily, just for a week or 2 while they rip up the floors." I stared at him, my heart hammering against my bruised ribs. Sophia, my mother-in-law, a woman who treated my existence as a minor inconvenience in her relationship with her son. "You moved her in while I was in the hospital, without asking me." "You were recovering, Kennedy," he said, avoiding my gaze as he unbuckled his seatbelt. "I didn't want to stress you out. It's just temporary. She's been helping get the house ready for you." I didn't wait for him to open my door. I pushed myself out of the car, biting back a groan of agony as I shuffled up the porch steps. I pushed the front door open, and the scent hit me before my eyes could even adjust to the light. It wasn't the smell of cedar or the subtle lemon polish I used on the original hardwood floors. It was an overwhelming, suffocating cloud of synthetic lavender and heavy rose perfume. "Kennedy, oh my poor sickly dear." Sophia emerged from the kitchen. She was 60, but she carried herself like a woman fiercely clinging to 45, draped in a perfectly pressed cashmere cardigan and tailored slacks. She held a steaming mug of something that smelled suspiciously like herbal potpourri. I tried to force a polite smile, but my eyes were darting around my living room. My sleek, mid-century modern throw pillows were gone, replaced by ruffled, embroidered cushions that looked like they belonged in a Victorian dollhouse. My carefully curated coffee table books on brutalist architecture had been swapped for stacks of glossy lifestyle magazines. "Sophia," I managed to say, leaning heavily against the entryway console, "I didn't know you were coming." "Cameron didn't want to worry your fragile little head," she cooed, stepping forward to pat my cheek with a cold, manicured hand. "I've been making sure the house is perfectly peaceful for your recovery. I even fixed up that dreadful, dusty back room for myself so I wouldn't be in your way." The blood drained from my face, pooling somewhere around my aching feet. The back room, the room with the vaulted ceilings and the massive north-facing windows. My architectural drafting studio, my office, my livelihood. I ignored the searing pain in my gut and pushed past her, practically limping down the hallway. Cameron's footsteps hurried behind me, his voice pitching higher with panic. "Kennedy, wait, let me explain." I shoved the heavy oak door to my studio open. I stopped dead in my tracks. The breath left my lungs in a ragged, silent gasp. It was gone, all of it. My custom-built, solid oak drafting table, which had cost me 3 months' salary. My dual-monitor setup. My shelves of reference materials, material swatches, and blueprints for my current clients. All of it had been completely stripped from the room. In their place sat massive, ornate four-poster bed draped in suffocating floral linens. A vanity mirror with bright, blinding bulbs had been drilled directly into my freshly painted accent wall. A pink salt lamp glowed obnoxiously in the corner, casting a sickly pink hue over the space where I had designed award-winning structures. It wasn't just a guest room anymore. It was a complete and total erasure of my identity. I stood there, swaying slightly, the physical pain in my stomach completely eclipsed by the hollow, ringing shock in my chest. I looked at Cameron, who was staring at his shoes, and then at Sophia, who was smiling serenely from the doorway. The violation of my sanctuary hurt far worse than the surgeon's blade ever could. "Where is my equipment?" My voice was barely a whisper, trembling with a mixture of physical weakness and rising, unadulterated fury. I kept my eyes fixed on the hideous floral bedspread, unable to process the sheer scale of the intrusion. Sophia clicked her tongue, a sound of patronizing disapproval that echoed off the walls. "Now, Kennedy, let's not get hysterical. Your blood pressure, remember? The doctors said you need rest. All that heavy, masculine furniture was creating a terrible energy in this room. I simply couldn't sleep in here with all those sharp corners and blueprints staring at me." "Where is my desk?" I turned slowly, gripping the doorframe to keep myself upright. Cameron finally stepped forward, placing a hesitant hand on my shoulder. I flinched away from him as if he had burned me. "Kennedy, babe, calm down. We moved it to the garage. It's safe, I promise. We just covered it with a tarp." "The garage?" I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat, choking me. "The detached, uninsulated garage? It rained for 2 days straight while I was in the hospital, Cameron. The humidity out there is 90%. My drafting table is solid, untreated oak. The moisture will warp the wood beyond repair. My client files." "I put the papers in some plastic bins," Sophia interrupted, waving her hand dismissively as if I were complaining about misplaced junk mail. "Honestly, dear, you work too much anyway. This is a blessing in disguise. A chance for you to step back, be a proper wife, and focus on your health. Besides, this house is simply too large for you to manage. It needed a woman's touch." I stared at her, utterly paralyzed by the audacity. A woman's touch? I had single-handedly redesigned the entire layout of this house. I had spent countless midnight hours sanding the banisters, choosing the exact shade of slate gray for the exterior, and wiring the smart home security system myself. This house was an extension of my soul. I looked at my husband, desperately waiting for him to intervene, to defend me, to tell his mother that she had crossed a massive, unforgivable line. Instead, Cameron just looked exhausted. "Mom just wanted to be comfortable, Kennedy," he mumbled, running a hand through his hair. "She's going through a hard time with her apartment. It's just a few weeks. Please don't make this a massive argument right now. You just got discharged. Let's just go to the master bedroom and get you situated." He was choosing the path of least resistance. He was choosing her comfort over my career, my home, and my sanity. "You let her dismantle my business," I said, my voice eerily calm now as the shock began to crystallize into something much colder and sharper. "You stood by and watched her drag my livelihood into a damp shed." "You're overreacting because of the painkillers," Cameron insisted, his tone taking on an edge of defensive annoyance. "It's just furniture. We can move it back when she leaves. Stop being so ungrateful. She made a pot roast for dinner." Ungrateful? The word echoed in my mind, bouncing against the walls of my stolen office. I looked at the holes drilled into my pristine drywall to support her tacky vanity mirror. I looked at the scuff marks on the original hardwood floor where they had clearly dragged my heavy desk out rather than lifting it. I felt a deep, radiating ache in my abdomen, a physical reminder of my vulnerability. They looked at me and saw someone weak, someone recovering, someone who would simply roll over and accept this invasion because it was too exhausting to fight back. I let Cameron guide me away from the room, my silence interpreted as submission. Sophia trailed behind us, humming a cheerful little tune, victorious in her territorial conquest. As I lay in my own bed, staring at the ceiling while Cameron unpacked my hospital bag, a profound clarity washed over me. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought my temporary physical weakness meant I was powerless. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Sleep evaded me entirely that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the dampness of the garage seeping into the grain of my custom drafting table, the condensation ruining weeks of hand-drawn blue. Eprints. The physical pain of my incisions was a dull throb compared to the sharp, burning betrayal radiating from the man sleeping soundly beside me. To understand the depth of this betrayal, you have to understand what this house meant to me and what I had sacrificed for Cameron. I met him 4 years ago when I was already established. I was 28, working 80-hour weeks at a prestigious architectural firm, saving every single penny until I could afford the down payment on this rundown, historic Victorian property. I spent 2 years pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into its renovation. It wasn't just a house. It was my masterpiece, my proof that I had built a successful life entirely on my own terms. Cameron, on the other hand, had moved in with me a year into our relationship carrying nothing but 2 suitcases, a mountain of high-interest student loan debt, and a severely battered credit score from a series of failed startup investments he had made in his 20s. I never judged him for it. In fact, I supported him. I paid off the bulk of his high-interest loans so we could start our marriage with a clean slate. I never asked for rent. I gave him a stable foundation so he could finally focus on climbing the corporate ladder at his financial firm. I had opened my home, my sanctuary, to him with complete trust. And then there was Sophia. From the very first dinner she attended at my home, she had made her disdain for me painfully obvious, albeit wrapped in a suffocating layer of Southern-style passive aggression. She introduced herself as a lifestyle curator, a vaguely defined profession that, as far as I could tell, consisted of judging other people's choices while contributing nothing of substance to society herself. She was always immaculate, her hair perfectly coiffed, her jewelry heavy and loud. I remembered that first dinner vividly. She had walked through my meticulously designed open-concept kitchen, her heels clicking sharply against the tile, and sighed. "It's so stark, isn't it?" she had remarked, running a finger over my polished quartz countertops. "Very cold, very masculine. Are you sure you don't want to hire a professional to warm it up, Kennedy? A man likes a cozy home, not a sterile laboratory." Cameron had laughed it off. "Mom's just traditional," he had told me later. But it wasn't just my aesthetic she scrutinized. Over the years, Sophia's questions had become increasingly intrusive, specifically regarding my finances. She would casually ask about the neighborhood property values during Thanksgiving dinner. She would inquire about the zoning laws for my large backyard, asking if it could be subdivided. Once, she had cornered me in the kitchen and directly asked if Cameron's name was on the deed to the house yet, just for safety's sake, in case something tragic happens. I had firmly told her no. The house was a premarital asset, purchased and solely owned by me. Her eyes had narrowed then, the fake, saccharine smile dropping for just a fraction of a second, revealing a deeply calculating, entitled greed underneath. Now, lying in the dark, I connected the dots. Her sudden, dramatic arrival, the completely unprompted destruction of my office, the very room that symbolized my financial independence, her insistent comments about the house being too large for me to manage. This wasn't just a mother seeking temporary shelter from a plumbing disaster. This was a hostile takeover. She was marking her territory, erasing my presence room by room, testing the waters to see exactly how much Cameron would let her get away with. And Cameron had failed the test spectacularly. As the sun began to peek through the blinds, casting long, gray shadows across my bedroom floor, I slowly sat up. I winced as my core muscles protested, but the fire in my chest gave me the energy I needed. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. I didn't open my messages or my emails. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to the letter B. Brooks. Brooks was a giant, heavily tattooed, no-nonsense contractor who ran the most ruthlessly efficient construction and remediation crew in the city. He had helped me with the heavy structural reinforcements when I first bought the house. He was loyal, he hated bullies, and more importantly, he owed me a massive favor after I had done the architectural drawings for his mother's bakery extension completely pro bono. They thought I was just a weak, recovering wife. They thought I would cry and complain and eventually surrender my home to keep the peace. I pressed call and listened to the line ring. It was time to show my mother-in-law exactly how an architect handles a structural hazard. The phone rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered on the other end. Brooks Construction, talk to me. Brooks, I said, my voice barely above a whisper so as not to wake Cameron, who was snoring softly beside me. It's Kennedy. Kennedy, kid Aaron. You supposed to be in a hospital bed somewhere. I heard about the appendix. His tone instantly shifted from gruff business owner to protective older brother. I was discharged yesterday, I explained, shifting my weight against the pillows and wincing as a sharp pain flared across my abdomen. Brooks, I need a massive favor, and I need it to happen today, by 7 o'clock this morning if possible. There was a brief pause, accompanied by the sound of a heavy coffee mug being set down on a wooden desk. You know I'd move mountains for you after the work you did for my ma. What's the emergency? I took a slow, steadying breath. My mother-in-law has decided to stage a hostile takeover of my home while I was incapacitated. She gutted my architectural studio, moved all my solid oak drafting equipment into the detached garage during the rainstorm. She's currently sleeping in a bed she shoved into my workspace. A low, dangerous whistle sounded through the receiver. She put your oak tables in the unsealed garage. Oh, that's just malicious, Kennedy. What do you need me to do? Want me to just haul her furniture to the curb? No, I said, a cold, strategic calm washing over my frantic mind. That would just make me look like the crazy, hysterical daughter-in-law. I need to play this smartly. I need a fully permitted, incredibly loud, highly disruptive emergency remediation. I want plastic sheeting. I want industrial air scrubbers. I want men in full protective suits tearing up the drywall in the guest room and my office. Can you claim you found black mold or asbestos risk from a previous inspection? I'm a licensed contractor, Kennedy. I can find a suspected moisture anomaly anywhere if I look hard enough. Brooks chuckled, the sound rich with anticipation. Especially in an old Victorian. We'll need to seal off that entire wing of the house. It'll be completely uninhabitable, unlivable, and incredibly noisy. Perfect, see you at 7. I hung up the phone, feeling the first spark of genuine energy I had felt in days. But I wasn't finished. As an architect who routinely dealt with massive commercial property developers, I had learned to never take a sudden emergency at face value. Sophia's claim that her luxury apartment building had suffered a catastrophic plumbing failure just didn't sit right with me. Property management companies of that caliber put residents in luxury hotels during major repairs. They didn't force them to sleep in their daughter-in-law's home office. I opened my email and drafted a quick, precise message to Marcus, a licensed private investigator I frequently hired to run background checks on commercial contractors before my firm awarded them multi-million-dollar bids. I gave him Sophia's address and asked for a full, immediate workup on her building's status, her apartment unit, and any recent financial transactions tied to her name. I marked the email as urgent blank check. By the time Cameron finally stirred, stretching his arms and letting out a loud yawn, I had already arranged the chess pieces on the board. Morning, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. How's the stomach? Sore, I replied softly, maintaining my carefully constructed facade of the tired, recovering wife. By the way, Cameron, I had to call Brooks this morning. With the heavy rain while I was gone, I noticed a damp smell near the back rooms. He's coming over to do a moisture inspection. Just a precaution. Cameron frowned, sitting up. Today, Kennedy, Mom is trying to rest back there. Can it wait until next week? Water damage doesn't wait, Cameron, I said, keeping my tone perfectly even. It's my house. I have to protect my investment. It's just an inspection. He sighed, shaking his head as if I were being entirely unreasonable, but he didn't argue. He had no idea that the trap was already set and the jaws were about to snap shut. At precisely 6:55 a.m., the rumble of heavy diesel engines vibrated through the floorboards of my bedroom. I threw on a comfortable robe, ignoring the pulling sensation in my stitches, and slowly made my way down the sweeping staircase. Cameron was already in the kitchen, half-dressed in his work clothes, staring out the window with a look of utter bewilderment. "Kennedy, there are 3 commercial box trucks in our driveway," he said, his voice rising in panic. "And men in hazmat suits are walking up the porch steps." Before I could answer, a loud, authoritative knock rattled the front door. I unlocked it to find Brooks, flanked by 4 burly men carrying rolls of thick industrial plastic, heavy-duty staple guns, and massive HEPA air filtration units. "Morning, Mrs. Kennedy," Brooks said loudly, giving me a subtle, conspiratorial wink. "We got your emergency call. We brought the heavy gear. We need to isolate the back wing immediately to prevent spore migration." "Spore migration?" Cameron repeated, rushing into the entryway. "What are you talking about? Raise no mold here." "Actually, Mr. Cameron," Brooks said, his face a mask of utmost professional gravity, "an old Victorian like this? When moisture gets behind that plaster, it breeds toxic black mold overnight. Stachybotrys chardorum, highly dangerous. Especially for someone recovering from major surgery. We have to seal off the guest room and the back office immediately." Right on cue, the door to the hallway flew open. Sophia emerged, wearing a floor-length, violently pink silk robe, her hair wrapped in silk rollers. Her face was contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated outrage. "What is the meaning of this racket?" she screeched, her shrill voice piercing the morning air. "I am trying to sleep. Who are these filthy men tracking dirt onto the floors?" "Morning, ma'am," Brooks said, not missing a beat. "We're the emergency remediation team. You're going to have to evacuate that room immediately. It's officially a biohazard zone." "A biohazard?" Sophia scoffed, marching forward and waving her perfectly manicured hand at Brooks. "Nonsense. I practically scrubbed that room top to bottom yesterday when I moved the masculine garbage out of there. There is no mold. I forbid this. Cameron, tell these laborers to leave our house at once." "Our house?" The words hung in the air, heavy and revealing. I stepped forward, resting my hand calmly on the banister. "Actually, Sophia," I said, my voice steady and icy, cutting through the chaos. "It is my house. My name is the only name on the deed, and as the sole legal property owner, I have authorized this emergency demolition. Brooks, please proceed." "You can't do this," Sophia gasped, her eyes darting frantically between me and the workers who were already unfurling massive sheets of plastic down her hallway. "I am a guest here. I am family. I need my wellness room." "Your wellness room is a toxic hazard," I replied smoothly. "And frankly, I won't have my health compromised in my own home. If the noise and the demolition are too much for you, I completely understand if you need to find a hotel. Cameron can help you pack." Sophia's face turned a mottled, furious shade of red. She lost all pretense of the sweet, caring mother-in-law. She pointed a trembling finger directly at my face. "You selfish, hysterical little girl, you think you can just snap your fingers and throw me out? Cameron is my son. What belongs to him belongs to me. You are his wife, and it is your duty to accommodate his family." It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. The poorly executed threat, the blatant entitlement, the sheer audacity, it was all out in the open. Cameron stood frozen in the hallway, looking completely out of his depth. "Mom, please," he stammered. "Don't talk to her like that. She just had surgery." "Oh, please," Sophia spat, turning on him. "She's faking half of this to get sympathy. Are you really going to let her treat your mother this way?" Behind her, the unmistakable sound of a sledgehammer smashing through drywall echoed through the house. Brooks's crew wasted no time. A cloud of ancient plaster dust billowed out from the hallway, accompanied by the deafening roar of an industrial air scrubber powering on. Sophia shrieked, covering her ears, and retreated into the living room. The first confrontation was over, and I had successfully reclaimed the physical territory. But the war had just begun. By noon, my beautiful, quiet home had been transformed into an active construction zone. The noise was beautifully, agonizingly loud. The whine of circular saws, the thud of heavy boots, and the constant hum of the filtration units made conversation nearly impossible. Sophia was trapped in the living room, sitting stiffly on the sofa, her belongings hurriedly shoved into garbage bags that Brooks's crew had tossed out of the hazard zone. She spent the entire afternoon frantically texting and making hushed, angry phone calls. I sat at the kitchen island, calmly sipping herbal tea, reviewing blueprints on my tablet as if nothing unusual were happening. Around 2 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a secure email notification from Marcus, my private investigator. I opened the file, and a grim, satisfied smile spread across my face. The report was thorough and incredibly damning. Marcus had sent time-stamped photographs of Sophia's luxury apartment building. There were no plumbing trucks. There were no remediation vans. The building was in pristine condition. Furthermore, Marcus had pulled the public short-term rental listings for her exact unit. She had listed it fully furnished 3 weeks ago. 2 days before I went into the hospital, she had signed a highly lucrative 6-month lease with a traveling corporate executive, pocketing over $4,000 a month in rent. She hadn't been displaced by a disaster. She had orchestrated a profitable long-term move into my home, planning to live rent-free while slowly pushing me out of my own space. Marcus H. Ad also uncovered 2 previous civil judgments against her for unpaid luxury car leases that she had tried to hide under different LLCs. She was a professional grifter, and my husband was her easiest mark. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. I printed the entire dossier on my small wireless kitchen printer, sliding the warm pages into a sleek manila folder. Just as I finished, Cameron walked into the kitchen. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, the stress of the day practically radiating off him. He ran a hand over his face. "Kennedy, we have to talk," he said quietly, glancing nervously toward the living room where his mother was sulking. "This has gotten out of hand. Mom is threatening to call the city on your contractors. She says they're operating without proper permits." "They have all their permits, Cameron," I said evenly. "Brooks is a professional." "Look, she's really stressed," Cameron pleaded, stepping closer. "She just told me that because of this mold issue, she feels totally unwelcome. So, she's invited Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert over for a formal family dinner tonight. She wants to have an intervention about your post-surgery behavior. She even mentioned wanting to sit down with a lawyer to discuss adding my name to the deed of this house to ensure family stability moving forward." My blood ran completely cold. She wasn't just trying to survive the day, she was escalating. She was bringing in reinforcements to bully a woman recovering from abdominal surgery into signing over the rights to her property. "An intervention," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "She wants to take my home." "She doesn't want to take it, Kennedy. She just wants to make sure I'm protected." Cameron defended her, his voice rising in frustration. "She's my mother. She's sleeping on our couch because her home is flooded with sewage, and you're treating her like a criminal." "Her home is flooded with sewage?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, terrifyingly calm register. I picked up the manila folder from the counter. "Is that what she told you? Is that what she swore to you, Cameron?" "Yes, and you know that." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I simply opened the folder and slid the first photograph across the quartz countertop. It was a crisp, high-resolution image of a smiling family carrying groceries into Sophia's supposedly flooded apartment building. Cameron frowned, looking down at it. "What is this?" "Keep looking," I commanded. I slid the next document across. It was a copy of the short-term lease agreement, signed by Sophia, dated 2 days before my surgery. "Read the rental amount, Cameron," I instructed, my eyes locked onto his face, watching the color rapidly drain from his cheeks. "Read the duration of the lease." Cameron's hands began to tremble as he picked up the paper. His eyes darted rapidly back and forth across the text. 6 months, he whispered, his voice cracking. $4,000 a month, but, she said the pipes burst. "There are no burst pipes, Cameron. There is no sewage," I said, leaning in close so he could hear the absolute finality in my voice over the roar of the construction equipment. "Your mother rented out her apartment for a massive profit. She moved into my house intending to stay for half a year, live entirely rent-free, destroy my career workspace, and now she is actively plotting to bully me into giving up half my equity to you. She didn't come here for shelter. She came here for a hostile takeover." Cameron dropped the papers onto the counter as if they were on fire. He stumbled back a step, looking violently ill. The absolute, blind loyalty he had held for his mother was fracturing right in front of my eyes. The spell was finally broken. "Tonight's dinner," I said, closing the folder with a sharp, decisive snap. "Let her have it. Let Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert come, because I am going to make sure it is a meal none of them will ever forget." By 5 o'clock in the evening, Brooks and his crew had packed up their heavy equipment for the day, leaving behind a sterile, silent barrier of thick, translucent plastic sheeting that completely sealed off the back wing of the house. The deafening roar of the industrial air scrubbers had been replaced by a heavy, suffocating quiet. The dust had settled, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a drywall saw. I remained in my bedroom, resting my healing abdomen against a mound of pillows, mentally rehearsing every single word I was about to say. I had the manila folder resting on my lap, my fingers tracing the smooth edges of the paper. This was my ammunition. Downstairs, the charade was in full swing. I could hear the clinking of expensive crystal and the overly loud, performative laughter of my mother-in-law. Sophia had taken it upon herself to order an extravagant, multi-course meal from an upscale Italian caterer downtown, undoubted. Lie charged to Cameron's credit card to set the stage for her grand intervention. At exactly 6:30, the doorbell chimed. I heard the front door open, followed by the booming voice of Uncle Robert and the shrill, dramatic greetings of Aunt Patricia. They were Sophia's older sister and brother-in-law, the self-appointed patriarch and matriarch of Cameron's extended family. They had always treated Sophia like a fragile, long-suffering widow who needed constant protection, completely blind to the fact that she was the one pulling all their strings. I took a deep, steadying breath, tied my robe tightly around my waist, and picked up the folder. I descended the sweeping wooden staircase slowly, making sure my posture was perfectly straight despite the lingering ache in my core. When I entered the formal dining room, the scene was almost comical in its forced domesticity. Sophia was pouring a dark red wine into oversized glasses, playing the role of the gracious, beleaguered hostess in my own home. Patricia and Robert were seated at my mahogany dining table, looking around with expressions of deep, judgmental concern. Cameron sat at the far end, his face pale, his eyes fixed firmly on his empty porcelain plate. He hadn't spoken a word to me since I showed him the photographs in the kitchen. "Ah, there she is," Aunt Patricia sighed, her voice dripping with artificial pity as she spotted me. "Kennedy, dear, we were so worried. Sophia told us about your episode this morning, and all this dreadful construction tape in the hallway. Really, bringing in a demolition crew the day after surgery, we need to talk about your stress levels." "Hello, Patricia." "Robert," I said evenly, pulling out my chair and sitting down directly across from Sophia. "It's not an episode. It's an emergency remediation for toxic mold. As the homeowner, it is my legal and financial responsibility to protect the asset. Sophia scoffed loudly, waving her hand in dismissal. Asset. Listen to her, Robert. She talks about this beautiful family home as if it's a corporate spreadsheet. This is exactly what I was talking about. She has no concept of family, no concept of creating a warm, inviting sanctuary for my son. Uncle Robert cleared his throat, leaning forward and resting his elbows heavily on my table. Now, Kennedy, we all know you've been through a physical ordeal. Surgery can do strange things to a woman's hormones. It can make you paranoid. Hostile, even, Sophia is completely displaced. Her luxury building had a catastrophic plumbing failure. Sewage in the carpets, walls torn open. She comes here for a little family support, and you hire men in hazmat suits to tear up the walls and throw her belongings into garbage bags. It's frankly abusive, Patricia chimed in, adjusting her pearl necklace. Cameron, I am shocked you are allowing your wife to treat your mother this way, which brings us to why we are here tonight. We need to discuss the deed to this house. Sophia nodded solemnly, dabbing at her dry eyes with a linen napkin. I just worry for Cameron's future, she whispered softly, playing the victim with Oscar-worthy precision. With Kennedy's health being so fragile and her erratic, impulsive decisions, what if something happens? Cameron has no legal right to the roof over his own head. I spoke to a family attorney this afternoon, Kennedy. For the sake of the marriage, you need to sign a quitclaim deed to add Cameron as a joint owner. It's the only fair way to prove you are committed to this family. The sheer audacity of the ambush hung in the air. They weren't just asking, they were demanding. They had cornered me in my own dining room, weaponizing my medical recovery to stage a legal theft of my property. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I looked directly at Cameron. He was trembling slightly, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and terrified, waiting for my move. A quitclaim deed? I repeated slowly, letting the words echo in the silent room. I turned my gaze back to Sophia, who was looking at me with a smug, victorious glint in her eyes. You brought your sister and brother-in-law here, ordered a $500 catered dinner, and fabricated a story about hormones to bully me into giving up $500,000 asset. It's about family stability, Robert barked, his face reddening. Don't be so dramatic. Speaking of dramatic, I said, my voice dropping to a low, commanding register that silenced the room instantly. I placed the manila folder onto the center of the mahogany table. I opened it with deliberate, measured slowness. Let's talk about family stability. Let's talk about your catastrophic plumbing failure, Sophia. I pulled out 3 thick stacks of stapled papers. I handed one to Robert, one to Patricia, and pushed the final one toward Sophia. What is this nonsense? Patricia demanded, though she instinctively pulled her reading glass. Ease down from her forehead. That, I said clearly, is a comprehensive background check and private investigation report, completed this afternoon by a licensed firm. Page 1 is a time-stamped photograph of Sophia's apartment building, taken at 2 o'clock today. Notice the lack of plumbing trucks. Notice the pristine condition of the lobby. Robert squinted at the photograph, his frown deepening. I don't understand. Sophia, you said the lobby was flooded with black water. It's a misunderstanding, Sophia blurted out, her voice suddenly high and reedy. The smugness had vanished from her face, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. The damage was localized, it was just my floor. Turn to page 3, I instructed, ignoring her entirely. The sound of paper rustling filled the room. Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That is a legally binding, 6-month short-term lease agreement, I continued, my voice echoing off the walls with undeniable authority. Signed by Sophia 3 weeks ago. She rented her fully furnished, perfectly functional apartment to a traveling corporate executive for $4,000 a month. Her plan was to move into my home, destroy my architectural studio to build herself a permanent wellness room, and live entirely rent-free for half a year while collecting a massive secondary income. Sophia, Robert whispered, staring at the signature on the lease. "Is this true? You told us you were practically homeless. You borrowed $2,000 from us yesterday for emergency expenses." The room erupted. Patricia slammed the papers down, her face flushed with furious indignation. She turned on her sister, demanding answers, her voice rising in a chaotic crescendo of betrayal. Sophia was stammering, crying real tears now, desperately trying to string together a lie about the tenant being a friend in need, about the money being an investment for Cameron. But I wasn't watching them, I was watching Cameron. He slowly pushed his chair back. The scraping of the wood against the floor sounded like a gunshot, cutting through the shouting. He stood up to his full height, his broad shoulders tense, his face hardened into a mask of absolute, unforgiving clarity. "Mom," Cameron said. His voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifying, vibrating anger I had never heard from him before. The table went dead silent. Sophia looked up at her son, her lip quivering. "Cameron, sweetie, please, she's twisting things. She hired people to spy on me. What kind of sick woman does that?" "You gutted her office while she was in a hospital bed," Cameron said, his voice cracking with the weight of his own guilt and realization. "You looked me in the eye, right here in this kitchen, and you swore to me that your home was destroyed. You used my love for you, my worry for you, to manipulate me into turning against my own wife." "I was doing it for us," Sophia cried, reaching a hand out toward him. "I was going to use the rental money to help you. You need to be on the deed of this house, Cameron. You have nothing. If she leaves you, you're out on the street." "If I am out on the street, it will be because of my own failures, not because I stole from the woman who saved me," Cameron roared, slamming his fist down on the table so hard the wine glasses rattled. Sophia flinched violently, shrinking back into her chair. Patricia and Robert sat frozen in stunned silence. "You didn't want to protect me," Cameron continued, his voice dropping into a harsh, ragged whisper. "You wanted to control us. You wanted to break her down so you could insert yourself into our lives and drain us dry. You have treated Kennedy like garbage since the day you met her, and I am so deeply, incredibly ashamed that I ever let it happen. I am ashamed that I defended you." He turned to me, his eyes swimming with unshed tears, and gave me a single, resolute nod. He turned back to his mother. "You have 24 hours to get your things out of my wife's house," Cameron said, his tone absolute and final. "No," I corrected calmly from my seat at the table. I looked directly into Sophia's terrified eyes. "You have exactly 24 hours to remove your presence from my property, but you will start packing right now. Because if you are not out of my house by the time my contractors return tomorrow morning, I will not call Cameron. I will call the police, and I will have you arrested for trespassing." The fallout from the dinner was swift, merciless, and incredibly satisfying. The entire charade collapsed the moment the truth hit the light. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert didn't stay for the catered Italian food. Robert demanded his $2,000 back immediately, and when Sophia tearfully admitted she had already spent it on the vanity mirror and the floral bedding she had shoved into my office, Robert threatened to sue her in small claims court. They left the house in a storm of slammed doors and furious shouts, leaving Sophia completely isolated and devoid of her flying monkeys. True to my word, I didn't give her a moment of peace. Cameron stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, silently watching as his mother frantically shoved her clothes, her makeup, and her ridiculous pink salt lamp into heavy-duty trash bags. She sobbed the entire time, throwing wild, venomous accusations at the walls, claiming we were abandoning family, claiming we would regret this when she was gone. Neither of us said a word. By 10 o'clock that night, less than 24 hours after she had first ambushed me at the front door with her floral wreath and her fake sympathy, Sophia dragged her garbage bags down the porch steps and loaded them into the trunk of a cheap rideshare vehicle. Because she had legally leased her apartment, she had nowhere to go. She was forced to check into a budget motel on the outskirts of the city, a far cry from the luxurious, rent-free lifestyle she had planned to steal from me. The house was finally quiet again. I sat on the living room sofa, feeling the massive, exhausting adrenaline crash wash over my body. My stitches pulled painfully, a stark reminder of the physical vulnerability I had pushed through to win this war. Cameron walked into the living room and slowly sat down on the opposite end of the sofa. He didn't try to touch me. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat there, staring at his hands, looking like a man who had just woken up from a decade-long fever dream. "I am so sorry, Kennedy," he whispered into the quiet room. "I don't even know how to begin to make this right. I was blind. I was weak. I let her walk all over you because I was too much of a coward to face who she really was." I looked at him. I saw the exhaustion, the genuine remorse, and the deep shame etched into his features. "You broke my trust, Cameron," I said honestly, not sugarcoating the reality of the damage. "When I was at my absolute weakest, you chose her comfort over my sanctuary. You let her erase me from my own home." "I know," he choked out, a single tear escaping his eye and rolling down his cheek. "And I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you let me. I will go to therapy. I will cut contact with her completely. Whatever you need, Kennedy, you are my family. This is our home, and I will never, ever let anyone threaten it again." It would take time. The wound in our marriage was as fresh and raw as the surgical incision on my stomach. But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I saw a man who had finally cut the umbilical cord. He had stood up to his abuser. He had chosen me, decisively and publicly. It was a foundation we could rebuild on. "Start by calling Brooks in the morning," I said softly, leaning my head back against the cushions. "Tell him the mold remediation was a false alarm, and tell him I need his crew to help you carry my oak drafting table back inside from the garage." Cameron let out a breathless, watery laugh, nodding emphatically. "First thing tomorrow, I promise." The next few weeks were a period of intense healing and restoration. The plastic sheeting came down. Brooks and his crew meticulously repaired the drywall Sophia had destroyed, and under Cameron's sweating, apologetic labor, my heavy, solid oak drafting desk was returned to its rightful place beneath the large north-facing windows. Miraculously, the heavy-duty tarp had protected it from the humidity. My blueprints were safe. My sanctuary was restored. As for Sophia, her grand scheme unraveled in spectacular fashion. Marcus, my private investigator, had sent a copy of the background report to the property management company of her luxury building. Subletting for a profit without authorization was a massive violation of her lease agreement. The management company immediately initiated eviction proceedings against her. Furthermore, the traveling executive she had rented to filed a civil harassment suit against her when she desperately tried to break the lease early and force her way back into the apartment. She lost her home, she lost her lucrative side income, and she lost her standing in the family. She was financially ruined and socially exiled, forced to move into a tiny, cramped studio apartment in a neighboring state, entirely cut off from the son she had tried to manipulate. A month later, I was fully recovered. I walked into my home office, the scent of cedarwood and lemon polish filling the air. The morning sun streamed through the vaulted windows, casting warm, golden light across my pristine drafting table. I smoothed my hands over the solid oak surface, feeling the strength of the wood beneath my fingertips. I had defended my fortress. I had protected my peace. I sat down in my leather chair, picked up my drafting pencil, and smiled. The trap had worked perfectly, and I was exactly where I belonged.